Congratulations everybody, you have made it to the final CM of Trackblazer. Is what I was going to say, but holy cow, Cygames really dropped a nuke of an update on us. Seriously, I don't think anyone was expecting the URA and Unity changes here, and although I will leave categorizing these changes to the other YouTubers, I will discuss how these do affect CM16. Either way, we can start with what will always be the most straightforward section, the track conditions and stat recommendations. The Leo Cup will be on the 1200 sprint right-handed Nakayama racecourse. In firm conditions, the weather will also be sunny and the season will be summer. There's a small downhill right at the beginning and the late race will start around the middle of the final corner. Remember that as we go into stats and skills. As for those stats, obviously you want max speed and power. Power particularly is important here since because the track is so short, you spend a lot of time accelerating, and that power will help with your acceleration and lane movement. There's also an uphill right at the end, which power will be nice for. Stamina is not something you really need to think about. If you have enough to finish the career, you have enough for this CM. Guts and wit are where it gets a little more complicated. I say complicated, but in reality I mean it's more of a personal preference. Remember that the downhill is really short and right at the beginning, so wit isn't going to be that important compared to other CMs. Of course, it's still nice to have for skill activation and overtake mode, but your way to be winning on this track is going to be extremely reliant on your excel skills as opposed to taking time to position. Remember that it's also really hard to pass on corners. Still, it's a good stat to have, but compared to your speed and power, wit isn't that important if you have to sacrifice it for good skills, for instance. The guts, on the other side of the coin, will be a lot more noticeable if you do manage to proc dueling or spot struggle. Now, we have seen in the last mile CM how strong guts can be, as well as that it's both hard to build and possible to win with if you just don't have that guts. Notably, that mile track also had stat thresholds, providing extra speed for every 300 guts, while this sprint one does not. Also do note that there is a very strong Bakushin Guts card that you could use as a borrow, which gives decent sprint gold in high spirits, but also it guarantees groundwork in its chain, which is a super powerful skill. Of course, you're still facing competition for your borrow slot. Narita Top Road, for instance, gives 2 greens for groundwork on pace chasers, while her Firm Course Menace skill is actually really powerful for once, because of how strong both speed and power are on this map. There's also Throne, which just makes your runs a lot easier by giving you free stats and skill points during your dead turns, but you may not want to run any of these cards since playing on Unity Cup scenario actually seems pretty viable now. You'll receive less skill points overall, which does suck, but since there aren't as many viable skills you need for a sprint CM compared to other CMs, and the skills that Unity gives you now, like United Spirit Power and No Stopping Me, might make it more than worth it to play on that scenario. But again, what you do here is pretty down to personal preference. If you can hit your stats and skills with high guts and high wits, that is absolutely the right play and you should be playing Trackblazer for that. But if you're having trouble with that, you can just go into Unity with your speed wit cards and run Power Sparks to just get free No Stopping Me. Is not a bad idea either. Now, as per usual, I have put up a basic tier list on screen for you guys of who I believe to be meta relevant. But I must emphasize, I actually do think this is a really Oshi friendly CM, with the big caveat, of course, that you have to get Sprint A. Generally, if you can do that and make your Oshi a frontrunner or pace chaser, you should have a decent chance to win. And even late chargers, I think too, are going to be pretty solid because of the buffs to the acceleration skills like Slick Surge and Ignite Spirit Power, etc. Let's look at some of these standout Umas first. Runaway Suzuka is back due to the buff for Unity, and she'll have a just really great time at taking the lead early and mid-race, due to the heavy concentration of frontliners, which are just frontrunners and pace chasers. Taking angling and scheming from your opponents will be a big priority for you, and Runaway does just that really easily. Suzuka also comes equipped with Concentration and Run Restrained, which are 2 really good skills for this track. You will, however, have a skill point deficit, which is unavoidable, but thankfully this issue is kind of mitigated because, as I'll talk about later, some velocity skills have much lower effectiveness than usual. Mayano Top Gun is also here towards the top because her unique and innate NSM are just super powerful here. Flashy Landing gives 5 whole seconds of speed and acceleration if she's in the top 3, and on the final corner, and it's blocked from the side. This will oftentimes activate a bit late, which for our purposes is actually kind of perfect. No Stopping Me is also incredible due to the heavy frontliner focus of the CM even for frontrunners, meaning the chance of being blocked or just being not far up enough to proc angling scheming are also pretty high. But of course you can get this skill for free now in Unity Cup, so maybe Mayano is a bit worse off. Nishino Flower is one of the strongest pace chasers here. Her unique provides perfect acceleration if she's in position 3-4, and she also has innate determined descent. Remember how the downhill is right in the beginning? That gives Descent a solo chance to fulfill the same role as groundwork, giving you an early lead. Oguri Cap Original and Taiki Shuttle fall into a pretty similar tier to Nishino Flower, but are a little bit inferior in my opinion. Taiki has worse innates, and Oguri doesn't have one of those excels as her innates, but she does have Tripulse and Nimnav, so that is enough to make her top tier. Although since Unity Cup is stronger now, maybe Nimnav won't be as important, just because everyone has NSM now. The other Taiki ult, the Camping Taiki, is kind of a side grade to the original. She unfortunately loses her Shooting for Victory, but in turn gains a pretty powerful late race speed unique. You can of course get Shooting for Victory, but it's kind of difficult to grandparent that skill on. But also having innate neck and neck and pace chaser corners is just really powerful here. And if you're looking at your screen right now and asking me, why in the world is Measure or Arden here? It's not that Arden in particular is super good or anything, she's more representative of the meta shift that I believe will come with the balance patch. We now have access to so many acceleration skills that having innate Budding Blossom or Shooting for Victory or Nimble Navigator or whatever just is not that important, and the late race speed provided by her unique becomes that edge that she can use to beat other Umas. There have also been quite a few unique and regular skill changes, and you may be wondering how those have impacted this Champions Meet. I'll talk about the regular skills a little bit later, but as for uniques, in my opinion the only one of note on a sprint track is the change to Special Week's original Shooting Star. She now gets current speed instead of target speed, which is really big on these short tracks where you're usually still accelerating, making her actually kind of viable of an option if you want to spark her up for sprints, or use her as a grandparent inherit. She's also one of the few Umas I think that is really good as a late charger, just because of her unique. Of course she does struggle a lot against groundwork paces and front heavy lobbies due to her reliance on passing another Uma right at the beginning of the late race, but a lot of players aren't going to do that and will just spam triple pace, and Special Week abuses those pretty well. Now I actually won't go more into depths on this section, just because for the purposes of this video, the specific Umas you run actually doesn't matter very much. What matters a lot more is just that you have access to those specific excel skills, which I'll talk about very soon, like Budding Blossom and Determined Descent, which obviously any Uma can get, but it just makes things a lot easier if you have them innate, like on Nishino Flower for instance. But in the case of excel skills, what is actually good? Well, what I believe to be the best skill in the game for this CM, first of all, the Generalist, Excel, No Stopping Me, and Nimble Navigator. These skills are going to give you acceleration in the late race as long as you're blocked for a single second. And while normally this isn't super overpowered because of that condition and the fact that Umas are usually spread out on the corners, these track conditions are basically the perfect storm to make this skill work. First of all, most Umas are going to be front runners and pace chasers, so there isn't going to be a whole lot of space between them. Everyone's going to be sort of clumped up towards the front. Second, because of the length of this track, the racers aren't actually given much time to spread out at all, resulting in a lot of blocking from the front or further side. Lastly, if you do run the same Sal on all of your Umas and run groundwork on all three of them, because of the small window in the second half of the race where the mid-race velocity skills are actually useful, your whole team will be around the same place, and you should generally be able to prog NSM off of your own Umas. And this is just huge for every role. Front runners can win even if they don't take angling, pace chasers can win if they're pushed out of position by a heavy front lobby, latent ends actually have a strong chance of winning with this skill. The only role I don't recommend this skill on is just runaway. So you have three great options to get this skill. One, Yukonobi Jinwit. She guaranteed gives this skill at the end of her chain, so that's one of the easier ways to do it. Two, you could just play Unity Cup and win versus Team Zenith. As long as you choose Team Carrot at the beginning of the run, you will get NSM to purchase. The third option is, if you still want to play Trackblazer but can't fit Bijan in your deck, is just to run Parents with a Nimble Navigator Spark and just get that white version of the skill. It's still pretty good, you don't particularly need to have the gold version to win your races. Another generalist excel option is Corner Acceleration and Corner Connoisseur. They activate randomly on a corner, and given that this track is just a short corner, I give it around a 1 in 8 chance of giving you value just by eyeballing the duration and the size of the map. And that sounds bad, and it is. But if you put it on Altar of your Aces, if you think about it, that turns it into a 42% chance of at least someone hitting it at a good time, which can win you games. I mean, that's like almost half of the games where one of your racers will be hitting this skill. I do not recommend going out of your way for this skill though, because of just how many good options we will have. But if you happen to have access to the skill, go ahead and buy it if you want. And I was going to end the general acceleration options section here, but because of the update, there are actually 2 more options that are just really, really good. For starters, Turbo Sprint has been changed from a random straight skill, which was almost useless on this track, to a random late race skill, like how On Your Left was. That makes it so much more viable now because of how short the track is in length. You can run Bakushin's speed card for this, but since there are better options, which I'll speak about soon, I think getting the white version sprinting gear is more than enough. The second skill we now have access to is Ignited Spirit Power, and possibly the gold version Burning Spirit Power if you manage to get that from Unity Cup. Previously, it was very hard to obtain since Unity Cup was not only bad, but you'd have to get it through basically bursting on power a lot. Now with our purple bursts, it becomes very easy to obtain this skill. You don't even need to hit a purple burst on power. If you have max hint for Ignited Spirit Speed and you click a purple burst on speed, you can actually just get a other random Ignited Spirit skill. And all it does is just be a generic Excel clone, but as I've said, those are decent on sprint tracks. On that note, Ignited Spirit Guts is also pretty good. It does lose some effectiveness if you are missing the gut stat on your Umas, but that's fine, it doesn't become useless. It still provides decent value, at least over the straightaway skills like Straightaway Adept. Lastly, just mentioning now, do not take Plan X or Countermeasure, please. Those skills are still terrible. Literally every gambling Excel, even Corner Connoisseur, has a way higher effectiveness rate. Now, on to Frontrunners. Angling and Scheming is, of course, your go-to Excel for Frontrunners as per usual because it activates perfectly as long as you're first place. Speaking of first place, since the Excel Zone is Final Corner, Unrestrained is back on the menu. But given that Suzuka's speed is kind of hard to fit in Dex this scenario, and because the skill only has about a 1 in 3 chance of giving you decent value in the first place, my advice is to just get the white version Final Push from a rival race or something. If you get Final Push alongside Angling, you should win most races anyway, and it won't sacrifice much. The main reason I'm saying this is just because if you're choosing a gold gambling Excel for Frontrunners, Turbo Sprint from Bakushin Speed is just better, unless of course you're already using Bakushin Guts, in which case, okay sure, then you could throw on Suzuka Speed in that place. Okay, so that should be all for Frontrunners, so let's take a look at Pace Chasers next. Really, we're looking at 2 key inherits, Budding Blossom and Shooting for Victory. Shooting for Victory pops a little bit early, so it's not fully effective, but just combine it with another acceleration skill at the same time, like Budding Blossom or Sprinting Gear, and you'll be just fine. Both of these inherits require you to be in the 3-4 range, so that's your sweet spot for Pace Chasers. And in case you're forced out of that position by having 4 or more fronts, it's always super nice to have Neck and Neck or the white version head-on, as well as Nibble Navigator or NSM. Although normally these random chance excels like head-on are pretty bad, because of how small the late race is on sprint tracks, that makes this skill a lot more decent as an emergency excel option. Not only that, but the random chance excels like head-on have been significantly buffed. Now instead of popping at a random chance late race, they always activate in the first half of the late race, more than doubling their effectiveness. Definitely try to get this skill if you can. That's it for the regular Pace Chaser excels, but I'll touch on the Turban Descent again, since it's technically an acceleration skill. And this very skill is pretty important to have as a Pace Chaser, and is essentially a less consistent version of Groundwork. It will always proc sometime during the early race because of where the downhill is on this track, giving you a solid chance of taking an early lead. Although latent ends typically struggle on this track due to the lack of excels, this patch actually gave them a lot more viability, most notably with the addition of Ignited Power and Guts, as well as the buff to random chance excels like Slick Surge. Other than those, your other options are Let's Pump Some Iron, which does work but requires you to be 6th place, or Shooting Star, which requires you to pass a racer in the late race. I highly recommend playing Unity for those 2 styles because No Stopping Me and Ignited Spirit Power are going to be your main ways to win. as well as, of course, sprinting gear. And there is one advantage to playing Trackblazer, however, and that is, out of the countless new skills, one of them is actually pretty good on this track, and that is Leap Forward. The skill seems pretty good, but I'm a little hesitant to recommend fishing for a rival race drop. So again, I think Unity Cup is going to be a bit more consistent. Now, excels are done, let's look at just regular skills and talk about what's good. Normally you just buy any velocity skill, but on sprint tracks that changes a bit. For starters, corner skills will be your go-to mid-leg skills, with about double the effectiveness of straight skills. Straight skills are actually pretty bad on this map unless you do have groundwork or get an early determined ascent proc, because essentially there are two places where these straight skills can activate, towards the beginning or the end. If you don't have groundwork or whatever and you are still accelerating in the early race and your straightaway adept or whatever pops right then, you're going to get basically no value out of this skill. So it is kind of half the effectiveness if you do not have that groundwork or downward descent or whatever. Now this doesn't mean that they're bad, but they are a lot less important than the corner skills, which are going to be always consistent. Slipstream and Playtime's Over also fall into the same category as the corner skills, being pretty powerful at giving you carryover, as well as Light as a Feather and the gold version in High Spirit from that Bagushin Guts card. For Foreigners, you could also include Leader's Pride and Fast Paced. Those are pretty solid skills, and their gold versions Escape Artist and Top Runner. Other than mid-leg, what else is good? Personally, I'm a big fan of groundwork on pace chasers. It gives you a lead over the other pace chasers, which generally puts you in range of your pace uniques, your Shooting for Victory, and your Budding Blossom. Of course, it can also screw you over with PDM, but that's been pretty unlikely, at least in my testing, as long as the Forerunner in the lobby isn't terrible. It also puts you at a good spot for the Intimidate skill, another decent skill, the CM which reduces the speed of Umas behind you, kind of like Speed Eater. Of course, if it's too hard to get that skill or your deck can't run a free groundwork card, then go ahead and just run Straight Descent, it's good enough. But of course, Straight Descent is only a pace chaser skill. I forgot to mention that in case it wasn't obvious. But anyways, as far as other inherits, if you have a slot open or a grandparent slot, pace chasers can run Angling and Scheming so they can still excel from first place. Of course, this is if you do not have a frontrunner or runaway that you're running yourself. Or you can just run Triumphant Pulse or a Lifelong Dream, which is Measure Ardent skill for late race speed. Frontrunners can also use that Lifelong Dream skill since it is not position dependent. And as I've said, late race speed will be pretty powerful since there are so many acceleration skills to be handed out just like candy to all the Umas. And closers and late surgers probably want to use Triumphant Pulse or Shooting Star from Special Week. These are both good options for both late race speed, and Special Week Unique can also give some acceleration too. Another skill that might have potential is Battle Formation. It is a mile-only acceleration debuff skill exclusive to Festival Gold City. But with the introduction of Summer Gold Chip, that skill can now be used at a random point late race. Do I think that this strat is meta? No. But I think it does have a little bit of viability given that if it procs at the right time, you're basically guaranteeing victory by taking a whopping 0.3 excel from every Uma in front of you. And the main upside for this strat is that it's just incredibly easy. You can just throw 564 on Gold City and get the Hesitant skills, and you're done. This can also be done with Dominator. Originally I didn't have it in the script, but I'm putting it in now because the boom of Excel skills now makes Dom pretty viable. I am not recommending running more than one debuffer, however, unless your ace is Runaway Suzuka and can guarantee consistent Excel. If your ace is not Runaway Suzuka, your acceleration skills are probably going to be pretty inconsistent, and I think you want at least 2 aces to make sure someone is proccing something. Lastly, I want to talk about scenarios and deck building. Since we just got a big update to URA and Unity, I know that a lot of players might have joined during Trackblazer and actually not really know the best way to run Unity Cup. So what should you run for this CM? What is the best scenario? Personally, I think Unity is better than Trackblazer on average, and URA is not viable. URA does not give a competitive amount of skill points, nor enough skill hints themselves. Although the Racing Spirit skills are alright, they aren't as powerful as the Unity skills. Unity Cup notably does 3 things that Trackblazer doesn't. It gives you Ignited Spirit Power, it gives you No Stopping Me, and it does not require you to get high distance aptitudes in Mile and Medium. This is really notable for Umas like Curran-chan, which have very bad aptitudes and have trouble running in Trackblazer. Additionally, it's just a lot easier to run in general. You throw in speed and wit cards and you win. What it doesn't do, however, is give you as many skill points or high guts. Trackblazer is the only place where guts build is viable, so if you do have the whale guts cards, Iconodictus and Bakushin guts, and you can also borrow Throne. I think Trackblazer is definitely going to create higher potential Umas if you do have those really powerful decks. But if you don't, I think that Trackblazer is just going to be a bit worse than Unity because you're losing those free skills, and the gut situation is never going to be great anyways. So for both Unity and Trackblazer, I've been using the same type of deck, being just 2 speed 3 wit, but since Unity is the more changed scenario, I'll be talking about that. Generally, you want Kita for Curvature plus another speed card. I use Mayano, but you can just use Sweep Tosho or El Condor Fasa or Current-chan. Those are pretty good SRs. If you're greedy and have a high speed growth, you can probably get away with just Kita herself, but that does make runs a little bit difficult. 3 wit feels like the bare minimum to get any sort of decent wit stat, but keep in mind I have not been running Throne with this setup, I just cannot really fit it in my deck. Also, I know that you can hit really high rating with 5 or 6 wit cards, but please do not run that for your aces, since you're sacrificing your power and your skills, and you're going to have really high rating, but you're just not going to win. You may have also noticed that 2 plus 3 equals 5, and not 6. So congratulations, you can do math. But in reality, this is because the last slot is best used as a flex card in my opinion. You can borrow Throne or run Riko for your pal card. Riko gives you mood control and Throne gives you free stats on dead turns. And of course that pure passion effect, which will let her rainbow on random places. You could also slot in anything just for a skill you need. I've been using Smart Falcon Power for her groundwork, but if you have Bakushin Guts, that is also kind of a better card because she gives groundwork and in high spirits. You could run Daiwa Scarlet Power for neck and neck, Ishino Flower Wit for Determined Ascent, Suzuka Speed for Unrestrained, Narita Top Road Speed for From Course Menace, or just a 4th good wit card, literally anything you want, and that you want the value from that last card. You could just run that in this free slot. I do highly recommend skill point bonus on cards if you can afford it. Funny enough, it's more important here than in Grand Live, because we're just getting way less skill points here than in Grand Live. So I'll run through a few budget cards that recommend slotting into your deck. Fugataru Wit gives guaranteed right-handed under chain. Fuji Kiseki Wit has a skill point bonus and can give hints for Summer Runner. Agnes Takon Wit has a skill point bonus and is just a really strong card stat-wise. Sweep Tosho Speed has a skill point bonus, as well as possible slipstream hints, and Current-chan Speed can give you Intimidate and Sprint Corners from her events, which is also very nice, plus she's also a really strong SR speed card. But anyways, this video has been going on for way too long, so I think I am going to end it there. If you like this video and want to see more, be sure to like and subscribe, and tell me how much you've been liking the early Unity buff. Personally, I've been having so much fun again. Unity has always been one of the most visually satisfying scenarios to me, with those bursts and stuff. And now that they've really just doubled the rate of the Unity trainings, we just get to burst, and it just feels awesome. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and peace.